All right, I want to thank everybody for joining me today on our first of our 4 sessions regarding technical pieces of JD Edwards. Just a little kind of things as we go over to start with. If you do have any questions, there is a questions section over in your webinar. Feel free to type those in at any point. We'll be taking breaks throughout the presentation in order to review those and make sure that we can answer the best we can. If we don't answer your question during the presentation, feel free to reach out to me afterwards and we'll get going. The first session of the series is our mini 9.2 to 9.2 upgrades. This session is going to talk about how to stay current, tools, middleware, OS, and hardware stuff. So start off, let's talk a little bit about myself. I'm David Toll. I am the Managed Services Director here at Trillium. I've been doing JD Edwards for 21 years. I started out in CNC with JD Edwards, Oracle, PeopleSoft, the whole 9 yards. I did spend some time actually away from it and being an IT director at a manufacturing company, so I'm familiar with being on your guys' side of this call, understanding what needs to happen in order to keep a system healthy and functioning and keep the business running. Here is my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me whenever you need to, both my cell phone and my email. I do pick up my phone almost at any point, so feel free to do that. And so to start with, I want to share a little bit about Trillium. Most of you guys are our customers currently and know most of the stuff, but some of you may not be aware that Trillium, not only with implementations and upgrades with JD Edwards and managed services, of course, we do special projects. We do handle software licensing. We also work with cloud integrations. We can also help you with hosting if you're looking to get to the cloud. Picking partners, doing stuff. And we also do a lot of custom development that could be outside JD Edwards as well. So we do have a broad reach of what we can do to help you and your business out. A couple things you didn't know potentially about JD Edwards is we are a 16-time Oracle Excellence Award winner. We do have 170 employees in the United States. And we've been doing business for over 26 years now. So we've been around this industry for quite a while. One of the things I did want to point out, especially in the time of COVID, is that Trillium has done over 100,000 hours of remote consulting services in 2019. And the point of that is to understand is that we understand that in the days, the new normal, as they describe it, we can still support your business remotely and be able to accomplish a lot of projects and tasks that you need to do to help improve your business. If you do want to sign up for our monthly newsletter, if you haven't already, all you have to do is email weknowjde@trillium.com and we'll get you signed up. That is an excellent source of what's going on with JD Edwards. New things come out, new information, articles, a great spot, easy coming to your email, then you can read it at your convenience, find out what's happening in the world. All right, so let's get into this presentation a little bit. A couple things that you may learn in this presentation that are not JD Edwards is that a nuclear bomb was dropped on the United States at one point. Cows do produce more milk than they did in the 70s, and that John Hanson was our first president, not George Washington, like common believed. The other thing you're probably going to learn during this thing is there are upgrades with 9.2. Oracle has kind of led you to believe that that's not the case, but there are definitely little things that many upgrades you're going to need to do to keep your 9.2 system current. All right. So the first thing we want to talk about is Oracle's continuous delivery. But before that, I'm going to go ahead and do a poll question for you guys. I want to know, if I can do this correctly, I'm going to want to know which one of you guys are already currently on 9.2. So hopefully you guys all see the poll question now and go ahead and answer yes or no. All right, I'll give you guys a couple seconds to fill this in. I can see the numbers jumping in. All right. A few more seconds for those that are looking for their mouse. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and close the poll. It looks like we had about 83% of you guys on the call are running 9.2. That's a good percentage. So that means you guys should be familiar with Oracle's continuous delivery model. As you guys have probably seen, Oracle has extended support through 2031 for JD Edwards 9.2. That makes it sound like there's not going to be anything new and exciting. But one thing, out of their own words, is, as I'm highlighting here, doing so provides you with more than a decade of ongoing development, new features, innovation, continuous innovations, releases, and continued premier support. The trick there is the new. How do you get new stuff if you don't take the products from them? You're static if you do not keep updating and upgrading. So what is continuous delivery? In Oracle's words, continuous delivery is a software engineering approach in which our teams produce software in short cycles, ensuring that software can be released at any time. The way I like to look at this is very similar to the approach that Microsoft and Android and iPhones have taken. They're continually sending updates out. The difference between the Microsoft and the Android and the iPhones is that you have to go manually take these updates. While Oracle is continuously releasing them, it doesn't mean you're automatically getting applied to your system. So you need to go ahead and stay on top of that stuff, becomes something that your business needs to plan for. So let's talk about the continuous delivery of a cow. The most common cow in the United States is called the Holstein. In the last 40 years, it has doubled its production. You can almost think of this as your JD Edwards system. Since JD Edwards came out, it has taken on more responsibility and does more and more for your business. So now a cow, for example, produces 7 gallons of milk a day. Back in the 70s, it was only about 3.5. You want to compare that, one calf would require about 1 gallon a day. So really the cow has been redeveloped and redeployed and continuously improved in order to produce more for their business. So when you look at 9.2, here, this is an eyesore of a chart, but you can see all the new types of features and functionalities that JD Edwards is planning to release, is looking at planning releasing, and is researching to release. This is still coming down the road. Really what you're seeing here is there's almost something for everyone on this list. These are things that are going to be delivered in a variety of different ways and different packages. You also look at the roadmap. And you can see that Trillium is that Oracle is going to continue to release JD Edwards releases. You can see that 9.2D, if you're kind of following history there, looks like it's going to come out in November of 2020. Obviously, that's up to Oracle when they do that, but if you followed history at all, that looks like it will be the next tools release. You also notice that they look like they're going to change their naming standards from 9.2.4 to 9.2.D, which is equivalent in our world to 9.2.5. We also want to look at some of the other things that come out. Along with the continuous delivery monitor for tools releases, they also do delivery for Orchestrator and notification enhancements. For those of you guys who have been working with Orchestrator throughout its life cycle, this chart, even though it's difficult to read, I'm sure for some of you guys who have smaller monitors, but you can see all the different features that keep coming out and keep happening throughout. That is with Oracle, the Orchestrator is a continually moving, evolving process as it gets more and more mature. Really, so no matter how you look at it, there's a lot of change going on. Your business is changing and the software is changing, and it is going to be an effort in order to stay on top of it and make sure that JD Edwards and your business are going in the right direction. So what does it take to keep up? Well, the first piece of the puzzle is identifying the components. You need to know exactly what parts are in this interweaving machinery that is JD Edwards. So you can identify, is it your WebLogic that needs updates, your tools, is it your ESUs, is it your code current? What is it you need to do? The second thing you'll need to do is understand the risks. If I don't take a tools release this year, how does that affect me, my business, my security, everything that goes with that? Understanding those very risks help you determine which things you need to do in what order and when. You also then need to develop a strategy based on those components and those risks, knowing how do you keep going forward. I see this regularly in my practice, is that customers get blindsided by something that came down the road that they need a fix, and all of a sudden they need to take a whole bunch of tools releases or a whole bunch of baseline ESUs and potentially a tools release. A little project turns into a major project at a time that a business can't afford to do it. So having a strategy lets you plan ahead, make sure that you can get there, and make sure that you do it in an organized, controlled manner when the business is ready to, not when it becomes critical. Another part of that is staying informed. This is a challenge for everybody, including I work at this 24/7, understanding what Oracle's releasing, how it applies to things and that. But staying informed is the only way you're going to be able to know what are those key things that you need to do. Again, you don't need to execute those plans. Make sure that they happen. I've spent a lot of time with customers who have planned, but then not executed. Oh, we're going to push that off. We're going to push that off. Especially at this time with the COVID, a lot of stuff has gotten pushed off. Very good business reasons to do that, but you need to be able to know when you're going to execute your plan then. And of course, once you do it once, you need to wash, rinse, and repeat, going over and over it again. So let's talk about some of the components so you have those in the back of your mind as we talk through the rest of this presentation. The first group here is kind of what I call the base. This is where the things start. This should not be really JD Edwards specific. This is really the stuff that is your middleware and base layers there. So you got obviously your hardware, your operating systems. You got your middlewares, particularly like WebLogic and other tools like Java. You've got a database, and you've got some development workstations out there. All those are things that you do need to monitor to figure out what needs to be done to keep those up to speed. On top of that, you're going to have the JD Edwards pieces of the puzzle. This is the stuff that comes with continuous delivery. So when you look at those closer, along the top, we got ESUs and updates. Those are essentially the same thing. ESUs are smaller portions. Updates are cumulative of code that's being released. Oracle also has something called a feature pack, which sends new functionality or new pieces of data to you that allows you to do things differently. And those tend to be a little more specific. And of course, you've got your third-party products. Then you got the big layer of JD Edwards applications. That's your business code. That's what handles sales order entry, your finances, your voucher matches, your payroll, your manufacturing, your distribution, all that stuff. And that sits on the JD Edwards tools. And the JD Edwards tools is really the engine that drives these functions that are your business. So you can kind of see how they kind of build upon each other. All right, so let's talk about application updates. I think probably at this point, many of you had that same look on your face as this lady does. A little bit of, oh, this is a lot of work there. And yes, it is. But let's break it down a little bit. We can get a little more detail. So first, all about that US, a bomb being dropped on the US. So did you know in 1958, the United States was doing a training mission with a live nuclear bomb when two airplanes collided off the coast of Atlanta. The pilots of the plane radioed to their commanders who authorized them to jettison their nuclear bomb. This nuclear bomb fell into what they believe the Sound there and is buried under 15 to 20 feet of mud and guck. They have not been able to retrieve that yet. In fact, they're not exactly sure where it's located anymore. So there was, while it never did detonate, a nuclear bomb did drop on the United States. So the JD Edwards bomb is that if you move to 9.1, move from 9.1 to 9.2 before 2017 and haven't done code current, you are more out of date today than you were when last time you upgraded. 2017 doesn't seem that far away to me, but it's kind of important to realize that you've been cruising along and there has been a significant amount of changes to JD Edwards and you've been out. And since there hasn't been a 9.3 release, it's kind of probably missed your radar. So it's something you do need to kind of focus on. All right, so one of the things that's important is when you're trying to create a business case for code current. One of the first places you're going to look for a business case is enhancing the business process. There's going to be new functionality that's come out since 9.2 has come out, such as lease accounting, GL batch status, license plating optimizations. So you're going to look at those to see if there is any business cases and reasons and values to do code current. You're going to look at customer-driven productivity, those types of functionalities that came out that help you enhance your business. You're also going to have some regulatory requirements. There are end-of-year requirements for 1099s and W-2s. Another driving factor is code fixes. Oracle has released many fixes to different pieces of applications, and you don't have those. Some may not apply to you, but some may. So you should know what those reasons are and how that affects your business. Oracle also does release a whole series of performance improvements that help improve and keep your system running smoothly. And then also there's a little bit of discussion about 64-bit and when you're going to do that and how that plays into staying with your code current. So giving an idea of how much change is happening, an application update. 9.2 update 4 was released last year in October. There was 9,992 objects. It's really about 15% of the system there. And there's what's there. Since then, there's been an additional 71 baseline ESUs released, and this is about a month old, so it was probably even higher now, but there's almost 1,900 ESUs that have been released since last October. So staying on top of that becomes an ongoing challenge. Luckily, Oracle has presented some tools to help you out. The first one is Change Assistant. Change Assistant is a Java-based tool that you can load. Normally people run on the deployment server. It lets you go out, easily search, scan, and find ESUs and other downloads that you may want for your system. You can see on my screenshot here that I have a fixed current that you can review, and it shows you all the ESUs that you've got to get fixed current with 9.2. This allows a quick and easy way to download and start preparing your code current. The next tool is impact analysis. This is one that we've heard a lot of talk about, but I haven't seen a lot of customers use it. This is a way where you can take an ESU and compare it to what you have in your system. It will generate a report, and there's a obviously a screenshot you can show there to show it. So when you're looking at this one, I can see that when I did this one for 9.2 update 4, the 992 objects, you can see it's affecting about only 2,582 of them are actually going to be updated. So I'm looking at about 25% of the objects in my system were going to be updated. I don't have any modifications to the system I ran this, so my mod list came back as 0. But if you did have modifications, like you did update your sales order entry, it would identify those so you know the level of effort it's going to take of retrofitting those changes back into your code. The impact analysis does a great job with a lot of things, but it does have some misses. So one of the things you want to think about, and not just depend on the impact analysis, is that if you use any custom object that use standard code, they may require retrofitting. An example would be Oracle changes one of the master business functions that you use and requires another parameter. When you take the ESU, the applications that call it that's going to be added automatically, and Oracle is going to send that to you. However, if you call that from a standard, from a custom object, calling that standard code, you may have to go retrofit and add those parameters back, or add those new parameters in so that the business function processes properly. You also want to look at your copied objects. It does not analyze those. So if you took your P4210 and made a P55 4210, you're not going to get any of those fixes in there, which leaves a question of, do you want to apply those fixes into your 5510, or is it okay to leave it where it's at? Those are decisions that have to determine on how much effort you want to put into it. The impact analysis does not touch BI Publisher. It does not tell you anything that's happening within your BI Publisher templates. It does a little work with control tables, but your UDC's task, it doesn't provide any information there. So you need to watch and make sure that you're not overwriting or changing any of your UDCs and tasks that you've customly done. So here's a little expert's trick. A lot of our technical CNCs will use a SQL statement, some of this where we query across the F9861 and the F9860 to see where this flag is. This is called the mod flag, to see what objects are modified. This is a real easy and dirty way to get into your system to look and see how much customizations you have. Typically, when you do apply ESUs and baselines, they will overwrite your modifications. So you will have to know what those are and go back and retrofit them. When you go back and retrofit them, an easy way to do that is ER Compare. ER Compare is a tool I'm sure all the developers are familiar with, but maybe not everybody on the phone on this call are. It's a way that you can look at two sets of code next to each other and determine what changes have happened. The example of screenshot, you can see the stuff in red is stuff that is existing in pristine, but not existing in whatever local environment I'm looking at right now. This makes retrofitting a bunch easier than it did during the initial upgrade. During the initial upgrade, you were probably writing this code line by line. During your retrofitting, you can actually go and kind of cut and paste and move this over, which saves a lot of time and reduces the number of errors. If you want to go code current, there are a couple kind of key steps to it. You're going to want to be able to apply UN4 first and then apply all the ESUs to development. You're going to do your retrofitting. You're going to test it, applying it to PY, rework, then apply it to PY, and then go live. A couple optional recommendations that Trillium typically puts out there is we do recommend refreshing your PD path code down to DV first. That way you're studying exactly what's being used in production. It eliminates anybody who's did any crazy test coding or had been playing around in DV before you get started. You also may want to look at applying tools releases, refreshing hardware, doing a whole bunch of the items we're going to get to in a little bit here. The one thing to remember about doing application upgrades and doing ESUs and updates is that it changes the business code. That's the stuff that actually runs your business. It's the one that processes your sales order, processes your finance. So you're going to need to do a full level of testing. It uses kind of the same spec process as a 9.1 and 9.2 upgrade. So there's a very similarity to what you did when you did the upgrade there, because it is going to change or replace your code. There are special instructions you need to apply. If you're doing just pieces, just doing an ESU or two, you can test in different varieties. There's small levels of testing based on the objects that were changed. When you get to like a baseline, you're going to do a medium. You're going to probably test everything that's in distribution or finance, or whatever that baseline looks like. When you get to large, like when you talk to update 3, update 4, code current, you're going to want to do a full CRP test. The end result is really you want to test everything. All right, I'm going to take a pause at the moment and see if there's any questions out there. Chris, I don't know if you've got your line muted. Have you seen any questions come in yet?
So far, we have no questions.
All right, so if you
great detail.
Perfect. If you guys have any questions, feel free to type them in, and we can get to those. Thank you so much, Chris. All right, let's talk about tools releases. So that, as I said earlier, that is the engine that drives the JD Edwards code. When you're going to your business and talking about it, here are some of the key things that people look at for the business case. First, we're looking at new functionality. Things like the JD Edwards interface, Orchestrator, Server Manager have improvements, changes, enhancements, kind of we saw on those earlier screens about what's new in the system. That tends to be a big push for people to do a new tools release. One of the other things that comes out that is important but doesn't come as a driving factor as much is that a lot of the security violations and security issues that Oracle has with JD Edwards are fixed through tools releases. So if you just noticed on Tuesday, the Oracle critical patching came out. JD Edwards was listed there, and one of the patches was for to take a tools release. The other reason is that another reason for business doing your tools upgrade is because you need to support different versions of OS, database, WebLogic, middleware, Java. All that stuff is based upon what tools release on a lot more than what application release you're on. So trying to increase that may require you to take a tools release. That's the business case. Previously, in earlier versions of JD Edwards, it was very sensitive to what browsers you were using. Tools releases and browsers were tightly connected. It's gotten better throughout the years. You can definitely use a more wide range of browsers and devices to use JD Edwards. However, there are still some limitations, and there are some fixes that come out in the tools releases in order to allow you to use different browsers or make them function properly. And of course, then there's bug fixes that come with the tools release as well. If you need to get something fixed, that's a very good business case if something's not working. The other part of a tools release is 64-bit is going to be a tools related item. One of the questions I've been asked a lot lately is Oracle requiring customers to transit 64-bit? You can see that their answer is not requiring it, but they're highly recommending it. my take is that this is potential, that one of the tools releases coming out in the near future is going to be 64-bit only, and Oracle is going to stop supporting 32-bit. For that reason, we are doing a whole entire session on 64-bit. So next Thursday, I highly do recommend showing up for that one to understand what that's going to be doing. If it's not on your radar, something you probably should start thinking about planning, because there are ESUs, tools releases, foundation code, OSs that are all going to be involved in your 64-bit upgrade. So it is going to be a bigger job than just a tools upgrade. Kind of the basics of what a tools upgrade touches is basically your servers, all the way from Orchestrator through your deployment server. You can tell through Change Assistant by going out and looking at the Enterprise One releases, all the different servers and where you'll need to apply them. All right, steps. If you want the steps to upgrade are very similar to your putting ESUs and baselines out. The first thing you want to do though is you always want to make sure you confirm your MTRs. And we'll get to those in a little bit here, but the minimum technical requirements are important that you know exactly that you're installing the tools release on supported hardware, software, middleware. You're going to then probably update your server manager first, apply all the prerequisites, build your packages in DVPY, and do your special instructions, and then up Orchestrator. That's going to get your non-production environment up to speed. Then you're going to spend some time testing, troubleshooting, and retesting where you need to before you repeat those same processes to apply to PD before you go live. Again, there are some optional steps that we do recommend depending on what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish and what your business case would potentially be. So one of the things you really got to watch with tools releases is the minimum technical requirements. You can get these off the Oracle site. And this is kind of a couple screenshots that show you that I know there are a bunch of eyesores here, but you can tell things are continually changing. Different versions of JD Edwards support different releases. You can look in, it's hard to tell in here, but you can tell that with 9.2.4 tools release, SQL Server 2012 is no longer supported. The only oldest version they can support is 2014. They also added support there for 2019. So keeping up to date knows exactly where you need to be for like your database level, OS levels, and middleware levels. All right, again, disclaimer, test everything. The one thing that I will say about tools releases is since it's not business code that's changing typically, we're talking true tools releases, we're talking about the engine. You want to focus on the things that affect the engine, interfaces, printing, media objects. You want people to go through the major business processes, but you don't need to test every voucher type. The business code hasn't changed. You just want to make sure you hit those pieces that would have changed in the tools. So it can be a lot smaller effort than doing a full-on CRP, but you want to make sure you've got a good plan that you're hitting all the key pieces. All right. I'm looking, Chris, I don't see any questions out there at this point.
We just had the one that, what kind of regression testing would you recommend for the tools release, which I think you kind of went through.
Yep. So again, focus on things that would be affected by the tools releases, and then focus, and then do your big business processes. All right, I'm going to pop another poll question out here at this point to find out how many people of you guys have gone code current since you upgrade to 9.2. We'll let you guys answer that quick. See how many people have fallen asleep. All right, seeing numbers come in, that's great. All right. We get a couple more seconds here. It's interesting. So if we close this out, we've got basically a tie that about a third of you guys have gone code current or have not gone current or have not updated your tools. And then about a third of you have done your tools, but not gone code current. So it looks like we have a lot of people out there who really should be looking at their code current and how that possibly affects their system. All right, closing that poll out. All right, so let's get to the middleware layers of the upgrades. A lot of times these are driven by your tools release and things that your IT folks love, but the rest of the business could care less about. That's what I kind of consider this section. So one of the things that's a very key thing of when you're trying to create a business case for upgrading the middleware layers, particularly WebLogic, is how much vulnerabilities have been exploited in WebLogic. These aren't JD Edwards vulnerabilities per se. These are actually true WebLogic vulnerabilities. So they're really avoiding the JD Edwards layer for their attack, for people who are attacking the cyber attacks, the cyber concerns. They're going straight for WebLogic vulnerabilities. The other thing you might want to look at is the reasons for updating is because the Oracle supported versions, where you're at with your tools, where you're at with your systems, where we are with other third-party products. There are new functionality reasons that come out, but one of the other big ones is that we definitely have seen that there are fixes and performance improvements by getting into later releases of WebLogic. And when I talk about vulnerabilities, you can kind of see these are a bunch of headlines that have gone out the news of different ways people have taken customers by attacking their WebLogic layer. Kind of diverting to a little story, I have seen numerous attacks to customers who have their WebLogic exposed directly to the internet. That has been an issue where I've seen cyber ransomwares be attacked. I've also seen some Bitcoin mining that if you don't keep your stuff patched and completely on top of it, it opens up an opportunity for people to get in via the internet. My personal experience is I haven't seen a lot of data being attacked. It's mostly been focusing on using that hardware or using ransomware to exploit companies. But that doesn't mean that it's impossible. So people can enter through the WebLogic layer, get into your network, and after that, they could do a whole lot of dangerous things. When you look at the WebLogic middleware, this kind of slide is to kind of show how often they release versions. You know, we're seeing, if you look carefully, it seems like every 18 months to 2 years, Oracle is releasing a new version of their WebLogic. One thing that's important to notice is they only patch back 2 releases. So you can see that you quickly go through your cycle. It is very easy to get out of date with your WebLogic and JD Edwards. Which is why you should be, if you're on, for example, if you're on 12.1.3, this year, October, is when they're going to stop releasing the cumulative patching updates for it. So it's a couple things about the upgrades for middleware. WebLogic can be done in place, the patching can. There's a tool that helps do that. It does require downtime to do that, but you need to just schedule it and make sure it happens, similar to when you do Windows updates. Major updates are fresh installs, which leaves the option of you can install it on existing servers by putting them in parallel. That does cause some challenges with ports and some other things that you have to work on. So most of the time, our clients elect to build a new server. In today's day and age with virtualization, it is easier to bring up a new server, put a new web server and install JD Edwards on it from the web server side than it is to actually install it in place. Reduce risk, so it becomes the better way to do that. Doesn't mean it has to be done that way, but that tends to be a way that works a little bit better. One thing to kind of also point out is you can see through the change here how as these tools release progress, so do the versions of WebLogic. So most of the time you do a tools release, unless you do them very regularly, you're going to be looking at wanting to upgrade your WebLogic at the same time, which could mean, as I said, either new servers or doing things in place. All right, when you look at the database level, we're talking databases move a little bit slower than the WebLogic. So you can see kind of here's a little bit of the maintenance supports of where things are at. I'm sure I know a couple of our customers, if you're on 2008, that has gone off of support since last July for SQL Server. 2012's extended support is coming up in less than a year now, right? That's to 7.13. So you need to stay on top of what is active support for your systems there. Obviously, you've got the charts for iSeries and Oracle. You can get those anywhere of those from their Microsoft, Oracle, and IBM's sites. So you look at 9.2.4, you can see there, when you can go to the Oracle certifications to see where they're at. As we talked about earlier, SQL Server has a variety of things. One of the things that's pointed out with the Oracle database, 18 did not make the list as a supported thing. We've got 12 and 19. So JD Edwards has skipped support for Oracle 18. So when you talk about upgrading database, with both Microsoft SQL Server and Oracle, you can do it in place. A lot of our customers do it in place because they have either designated hardware or they can do it quickly during an outage window to upgrade. On the other hand, if it falls in times when you're doing some of the other things like code current and tools, it may make sense to build a new SQL Server or a new Oracle database. On the Power systems, since the database is part of the OS, we tend to see that done in place as well. Chris, do we have any questions at this point?
Yes, we have one. If we are going to go through a WebLogic upgrade, what kind of testing from the JDE side would you need?
Typically what customers will do is they will typically put it into their non-prod first and run it for a week or two and run through just kind of the standard business processes. WebLogic is, the key there is the version of Java. And if you're getting your apps generated and stuff, you can feel fairly confident that things are working well. You're gonna wanna make sure you double check your things like import exports, printing, always check printing. That's the one that most people forget. And make sure that those pieces are working because those are related. Most of the time, you also wanna make sure that browsers are supporting. Trying the same thing in different browsers is gonna help a bit too. It doesn't mean you have to get into the details of every business case, but you do wanna make sure that if you try a voucher match on Internet Explorer, you also try it on Chrome if your typical end users are doing that, just to make sure it looks good. Chris, anything else?
And we just had a comment as well that during a tools upgrade, they said that it would affect your media objects so that they get stored in the DB now. And that's just kind of an update to the many different things that enhancements you get while doing a tools upgrade, right?
Yep. That was a one-time conversion that happens. It all depends on which tools release you're at to where you're going to and when you want to pull that trigger. You do not need to do it immediately, but they're moving media objects, C code. You can actually move your work submitted jobs to the server. Oracle, being a database company, feels that you should be keeping your key piece of the thing in the database rather than a file server. So at this point, I believe there's pretty much anything that was kept on a file share is now capable of being put in a deployment or onto a database. And it becomes more of if you want to or not and how you want to manage that.
Okay. Then we had another one come in. How many customers do in-place upgrades versus new server upgrades from 9.2.2?
It is very rare that people would upgrade in place. When you're talking 9.1 to 9.2, at this point, your OSs and stuff are going to be unsupported. So new hardwares or new OSs, new middleware is going to be needed. So you're going to start with new systems. When you're talking 9.2 to 9.2, as we are, if you are keeping things current, it is less likely that you need to bring new hardware and new middleware on when you do it. Like I said, with the web servers, it's nice because you can typically build those faster than you can actually install in place. But when you're talking database servers and enterprise servers, if your OSs are at 2016, you're probably in a good spot where you can upgrade at least one release. 2019 is now out, so probably in the next year or two, you're probably going to be looking to think about going to 2019. Not necessarily required at this point. So if you allow a couple years gap, and they're kind of summarizing that, if you allow a couple years gap in between your upgrades, you're more likely than not going to want to upgrade hardware and middleware as well. If you're doing like a tools release every year, you normally would only have to do it every other one or maybe every third one to dig into that. So frequency will really help you not have to dig into the deeper layers for some of the stuff. Chris, anything else?
Do we still require E1 ActiveX installed on the user's computer?
It is ActiveX is only required if there's a setting in the Jazz INI file that says whether or not it's enabled or not. Oracle has, it's probably been out 2 or 3 years now, Oracle has released a Java scripting version where you can turn it off and all the browsers behave the same way using a different tool. I will tell you that some of our end users have struggled with it. The functionality is all there, but it just works differently. And there is a learning curve for people to use the Java-based ones once they turn ActiveX off. But since ActiveX is going away, that's where customers need to start going to. And it behaves the same way as if they're using Chrome or Firefox or something like that, rather than IE.
Okay. And if people are kind of far out of date on the code currency, do they need to apply all of the updates, 1, 2, 3, or 4, or can they just jump to 4?
They can just jump to 4. 4 is cumulative, so you can go there and then they apply. And the ESU since 4 was released. So most likely there will be a 5 sometime in the fall. That's been their typical pattern, which will include all the ESUs up to that point. So that will be a point to kind of, as you're thinking about your strategic planning down the road, you know, putting one big update in is a little bit easier than applying a lot of ESUs in addition to an update. However, from a technical and from a testing standpoint, it doesn't change any of your testing. It just adds a little bit of work to the CNC technical side of it.
Okay, that catches us up on questions.
Perfect. All right, so let's talk about OSs. Well, first of all, let's talk about John Hanson and George Washington. A lot of people didn't know that the actual first president was John Hanson. He was made president under the Articles of Confederation, and that there was actually 9 presidents before George Washington. The caveat means that that's technically correct, but everybody recognizes George Washington as the original president because he was the first president under the United States Constitution, which gave all the powers of the presidents as we recognize them today. The reason why I kind of bring that up is that's what the OSs are. OS is the base. You need to have a strong base to know where you start from and what you're doing. When you're looking at your business cases to upgrading an OS, you really are looking at support. You're talking about vendor support, application support, and hardware support. There's not a lot of reasons above that you can go to a business and say you're going to gain this much business benefit for upgrading your operating systems. A lot of the times you'll get driven by some of those above things on the chart, like tools releases of what OSs you can be on and why you want to be there. You also get the push business case from your IT networking people and your infrastructure people who are always going to want to have some of the latest stuff there. When you look at operating systems, similar to what we saw earlier, here are some of the key dates of when things are going offline for Microsoft. Hopefully everybody is at least on 2012. Obviously 2016, 2016 data center and standard go off of mainstream support in January 2022, which doesn't seem that long from now, other till you put it at, that's about 18 months, 18 to 19 months here. So you should probably make sure you have a good plan of how you want to do that. Is it okay to go into extended support, or do you want to be on 2019 by then? Linux, very similar kind of thing. Linux has a little bit of longer life cycle, but if you are on Linux 5, your extended support went out in June 2020. And you got to look for your premier support for Linux 6 is next year, less than a year away. So it's something you want to keep on top of just to understand where you are for the support piece of the puzzle. For the I series, here are kind of the numbers there to kind of make sure that you're on top of it. So when you're talking about upgrading an OS, with Microsoft, that almost always means a fresh install. It's rare that you do an in-place. However, I will say that we have seen a couple customers do deployment server upgrades in place. in doing their OS and have had some success doing that. However, at the point you are introducing some risks that it is definitely more difficult to roll back if there becomes an issue than it is if you built it separately and have things running in parallel. So you always, that's why one of the big advantages of building both OSs in place. And that applies to Linux as well. The power system, that's a little different. Because of the way that works, most of the time you'll see an upgrade go in place, and the only time they really do it as a swap out is if they're bringing new hardware in. Your lease expires or whatever you change with your iSeries. Which really sits on, and really your OS sits on top of hardware. Hardware is another good reason why people want to upgrade. The business cases are pretty straightforward. It's memory, CPUs, disk, networking, all continue to improve. It is just amazing to me. I have my personal stories. I've just upgraded my laptop, and the new, if you look at the 970 Evo, I have a very similar hard drive in it. It is so much faster than my previous one, and that was only 4 or 5 years old. That type of increase in performance can be a business reason in order to move forward. Another thing customers are looking at is let's get all this hardware out of our vision. Let's get it into the cloud. Oracle, just as an important thing to note, Oracle runs in the cloud in a PaaS model, the platform as a service, without an issue. We have probably over half of our customers run in that scenario. If you have anybody come to you and tell you they're running it as a software as a service model, that is a lie. JD Edwards does not support that. They are pulling some sort of game trick on there. So watch out for the difference between that. Platform as a service works great. Software as a service, that is going to be an issue potentially even with Oracle licensing. Definitely all the cloud services, OCI, Azure, AWS, private clouds, all work with JD Edwards. We've seen them work very well. Trillium is hosting provider agnostic. We don't care which ones you go with. We just want the one that works best for you. So we can talk about why one might be better for another, but it's not going to be, there is no universal answer to that. Cloud can be a cost savings, but you must remember you need to evaluate the entire cost to get there. There are a lot of little pieces that play into what it actually takes to host your hardware inside and what risks you're taking versus having in the cloud. When those costs are accumulated, it can be a cost savings, but overall the price may look a little bit more than what you're doing right now because of how you would do your evaluation. The nice thing about cloud is it does completely extend your capabilities of your IT department. We see our customers that are on the cloud being able to bring up web servers in 20 minutes, 30 minutes by clicking just going ahead of procuring a new server. It increases the ability to enhance and improve your servers and your capabilities very quickly. When you're doing that, basically hardware refreshes. If you're doing physical machines, you're going to have to rebuild the OSs. That's going to be new. Virtualization, though, if you were using like VMware or some other tool, you can those become relatively simple these days because you can just move virtual servers onto the new hardware. You may have to load a new driver or a new client, but overall, it becomes a very quick process in order to upgrade your hardware through virtualization. And as we talked about, you can obviously move to the cloud. There's a couple ways to do that. One being a lift and shift, where you just move your servers over there. Another way, which we see more often, is rebuild servers. And the reason we normally see the rebuild servers is because when someone decides to move to the cloud, they will also be deciding to take a tools release or a code current or something along with it. So it makes sense to almost run them in parallel. You have your on-site running one way, and then you have your cloud going another, and then at some point, people will switch over simply by changing their URL. It reduces a lot of risk and gives you a lot of flexibility on your project there. Chris, any new questions come in?
Not at this point.
Awesome. Getting into a little more of the details, JD Edwards does have something called feature packs and third party, and people have made third party products attached to JD Edwards. Feature packs are really a mechanism for delivering JD Edwards content. Good examples are orchestrations, there's Udo bundles, automated special instruction tools, these all come in through feature packs. So it gives you a way to get stuff quicker and easier than manually putting it in from Oracle. When you're thinking about staying current and upgrades, your third party has all their own requirements. Similar to JD Edwards, you know, if you're running something like DSI or FSmart for your barcode or for your scanning and barcoding, those have very different requirements of what versions of tools they could be on and how that all matches up. So when you're thinking about your strategy, you need to go ahead and incorporate what your third parties are as well. All right. So here are some conclusions and recommendations based on all that. So a little reality checks here. When you're talking about hardware, pay attention to the industry, and the hardware will tell you when it's time to go. Similar as my story, my laptop, it was clear my laptop was slow. I knew it was an issue. It was time to get a new one. Your IT people, your infrastructure people, they know that things are suffering, and it will, if you're paying attention, they will tell you it's time to move. OS levels, and the reality is, keep it current with your tools release. Don't overthink your OSs. If the tools release is supporting it and you've got support on it, don't overthink it. Stick with what the tools release says. On your databases, patch it. Make sure it's patched. And again, follow your tools releases on there. You know, the jumps between versions of Oracle, SQL, and Power Systems don't necessarily buy you a whole lot until it's connected with the tools releases that you're moving to. Middleware, though, on the other hand, is one of my general recommendations, is always run the latest. The more updated you can stay, the more features, the more security patches, the more you're going to do, the easier it is to patch and go forward. You don't want to get too far behind on your middleware, particularly in your WebLogic. All right, and when you get the tools release, my recommendation for most customers, and this does vary a little bit, is you want to try to take a .3 or higher for production. You know, the .1s and .2 are good releases, but they tend to have a little more bigger issues than, say, like a .3 and .4 when you look at the end. And when I say at the end, you know, like 9.2, .4, .1, .2, .3 at the very end. So the 9.24 followed by whatever that number is what I'm looking at there. If you do, you know, sometimes you do have some production reasons that need to take an early release. Not a problem. It's just my general recommendation when you're planning that out. Along with that, you want to coordinate with your business cycle. If you have rushes around the fall, you don't want to be doing your tools release then. You want to find your slower times in your business, figure out what makes sense in the business cycle. And again, the tools release typically makes sense when sense to work kind of with your hardware and your middleware upgrades. On ESUs, my general rule is you apply one-off ESUs as needed by the business. You know, when they come up, get them installed and use them as you need to be. But I do recommend people look at code current every 24 to 30 months for most companies. There's some companies that have some requirements, then you do it sooner. There's some companies that get static enough that is not as critical that they do it. But for most customers, about every 2 years. And I prefer, and my take is I prefer to be a little closer to the update release. So like when we're talking update 4 just came out in last October, hopefully 5's coming out around October, November again. Tends to make it a little bit easier that you have one update you're dealing with. Not a requirement, just adds a little more technical work. One thing that's important to think about though is that you can go code current without going to tools. So if you're really concerned about just your code current, you can stay on the tools you're at and move forward. That means that your things like your OSs, WebLogic won't change underneath it. So you don't have to go into that in order to do to get your newest code. Which a lot of times customers will want to do this together because of the testing cycle. You're going to test and you're going to get all that incorporated together, but you don't have to. One thing that's also coming up, and we'll talk about this next week, Thursday, is 64-bit is also a logical time for code current. There's going to be some ESUs in the 64-bit you're going to install. There's going to be some retrofitting. At that point, if you're going to do full-on testing, it might make sense to go code current. Additionally, it also might mean it's time to look at your hardware, OS levels, all that stuff. So your 64-bit upgrade may be a relatively larger project than you may have initially anticipated. One of the things, if you can eliminate customizations and move them to orchestrations, that's going to help make code current go easier because you're not going to have to retrofit those each time. So, all right, Chris, any more questions out there?
I have a question on the difference between a simplified versus a full upgrade.
That gets into the difference between 9.1 and 9.2. Simplified tries to do things in place, while a full upgrade is going to put down the 9.2 code first and then merge things in. When you're talking 9.2 to 9.2, you're always going to be doing more. It's similar to a simplified because you're going to apply these directly onto what you currently exist. So when you stick to 9.2, you're really looking at applying updates and ESUs, which is kind of a version of simplified upgrades. Anything else, Chris?
No, sir.
All right. Again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I think most of you guys have my name, number from before. Email address is pretty straightforward, dtoll, T-O-A-L, @trillium.com. I hope to see you guys at the next series coming up. I think the next one's on next Tuesday, and then we'll have a couple more there. If you know other people who want to join, feel free to register. Let us know. We can make sure and get you the links out if you have trouble. Otherwise, the register link's right there. Again, thanks everybody for your time today, and have a good day. Bye-bye now.